Welcome to the Beautiful Step Podcast,
where we
run,
stomp,
tiptoe,
and tango into the confusing
but beautiful
world of togetherness. We are your hosts, Kris
and Charity.
Now, let's go make our together even better.
Hi, babe.
Hi, babe. I'm at the cabin. I'm cold. It's 34 degrees, almost freezing. I have to shut this place down and get out of here and get back to warm weather.
Oh, man.
It's cold.
Man. I can see my screen in your glasses.
Oh, nice. Yeah, it's really nice sleeping in this coldness. I like just cold.
That cold? 34 degrees?
Yeah, I don't mind it. I got a really nice blanket.
Yeah.
But getting up and moving around and getting motivated just takes a little longer.
Yeah, that's why I'm not there. But like in a few days, we'll be back together again.
I know. You're so lucky.
I know. I am lucky that you're going to be back here.
Oh.
Well, we've been having our fun coffee chats, even though we're not together.
And my coffee maker broke. And so this is warmed over 3-day-old stuff that I've been rationing.
That's so disgusting.
I love it. It's really good.
It wasn't good coffee in the beginning.
Huh?
It wasn't good coffee at the beginning.
No, it's Folgers. Extra strong, extra powerful.
That's not actual coffee,
Oh.
I don't think it's real coffee. I don't know.
I like it.
So you're taking a class at Harvard right now.
Mental illness as portrayed in the arts and literature. It's really interesting. Really interesting. Can I just start going off?
Yeah, I'm so intrigued by this new thing you're learning.
Well, there's I think we can all agree that there's this phenomenon of people who can't get out of their house, especially between sort of the ages of I think it's like 16 to 27, maybe even 30, where you find this phenomenon. I think it's probably more pronounced in young men, but also young women, where they're really stuck in their home, like mentally. They can't get out of the house. They can't interact with society. They really are sort of homebodies. I mean, wouldn't you agree that that's a phenomenon that's happening more and more?
Are you referencing like it's a failure to launch thing, or like they're
I think it's a failure to launch. It's they're living with their parents. They're dependent on their parents. They just can't seem to get into real relationships. Their life is somewhat virtual, and what has come up in the class is the question of, is this becoming a mental disorder where you can't really get out of your house? You are mentally ill, or at least.
Is this what they're saying?
Well, that's the question. Is this developing into a mental illness? And not just like a social phenomenon, but a real genuine mental illness. Anyway, so there's a guy, last name Sato, in Japan, he's a 53-year-old, lived in Japan his entire life. And he's seeing this phenomenon happening. And he has described the phenomenon. He's actually sort of described and is coming up with this diagnosis and some conclusions about how to sort of fix this in people.
Is he a psychiatrist? Or
he's a psychiatrist, psychiatrist. And basically what he is calling this phenomenon is Hikikomori.
Hikikomori, okay.
People suffer from Hikikomori. So it's like this, he's saying it's not really a mental illness, but it is more than just depression. It's like this hyper level depression that you really cannot get out of, like without some serious help or some serious, well, here's what he says to do. He says that what is happening in at least Japanese society, and I think this extends throughout. Okay, so I just have to qualify this really quick. Okay, when you look at Japanese culture and you look at American culture, what I've noticed is that a 53-year-old Japanese male is very close to the equivalent of a 53-year-old white American male. It's kind of, they have sort of the same sort of privileges. They have the same sort of patriarchal pressures. They have, I mean, I don't know, help me out here. It's like this, no emotion or less emotion kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? The
Sure.
breadwinner type,
Yeah, and I
that,
think you nailed it. Yeah.
right. And so he's writing from this sort of vantage point, right? But I don't say that to discount his vantage point. I say it because I think he really does have something to offer here. So anyway, what he says is what's happening in that person's mind who is stuck at home is they are, and this is a really, he uses this word, castration. And he says that a person who is not symbolically castrated cannot function in society. And what he means by castration is what like American society, like you and I would call getting your ass handed to you. And what he's saying is castration is these essential losses throughout life that only happen when you're in society. And what it does is it renunciates and it basically, I mean, it cures the all-powerful infant that you are coming up. Like you come up and it's like the infancy, and your infancy is all powerful, and you sort of stay a baby until you function in society and you get castrated. So one of the biggest things that you're going to find in Hikikomori people who are suffering from that when they're, stuck at home, is you're going to find that they're blaming their parents. They're constantly blaming their parents. Like, you didn't give me this opportunity, or, you didn't provide this for me, or maybe you never talked to me through that, or how could you not, whatever it is that, we all have daddy issues. We all have mommy issues. And what his take is, he's going like, look, what you're trying to get from your parents, they're not going to be able to castrate you in the way that society is going to be able to castrate you. So if you sit at home, you're going to continue to want your parents to do the thing that only society can do. They're going to love you and nurture you, right? They're going to protect you. They're not going to hand your ass to you in the way that only society can, which is a really important idea. And that like speaks to parenting, like, hey, parents, take a break sometimes, because there's things that you can't do for your kid that only society is going to be able to do.
Right. I mean, I think and I want to make a couple clarifications.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is, what is this called again?
Hikikomori.
Disorder?
Hikikomori.
Hikikomori.
It's not manic. It's not depression. It's like this. It's a pretty specialized thing, but I think he's onto something. It's a real phenomenon that's happening.
Right. I mean, I think we've seen this failure to launch, right? So
right.
I want to make the differentiation. We're not talking about like the disorder where you won't leave your home because you're afraid of everything outside. What is that? Agoraphobia or something? Or not that so much as like what people in America, and what I hear from like people, is this social anxiety, or right. but you're also saying this has it has ties to failure to launch. It's the reason, this social anxiety and these kind of things are the reason that younger people aren't leaving home. And that's what this guy is really studying.
Right. And he's saying, and so I guess one of the reasons why I said, like, I can relate to him as far as like a 50-year-old white male in America and a 53-year-old Japanese male is because essentially, if you boil down his message, he's saying, grow up. And he's saying it in a way that says, not just grow up, like get over it. What he's saying is, get out there, get a job, get fired, get out there, risk your heart, get into a relationship and get your heart pulled through your nose, get dumped, you know, I mean, do these things that will really, it will renunciate, or it'll cause you to renunciate the all-powerful infant, and you become mature, you become more even confident and independent through these essential losses that will cause you to be able to operate in society. And social anxiety, you have good reason to be anxious about getting out of your house. It is scary, and you somehow know that you're going to get your ass handed to you, but that is essential to becoming a person who can function and participate in society and in a relationship, and to cause you to actually have the ability. See, I think that's another piece of this, is like, it's not so much like, I want to have this perfect relationship and I want to, like, you know, make sure I find the right wife or partner. It's, do I actually have the ability to have a relationship? Right?
Yeah, do I have what it takes to
Can I pull this off? Is this a thing that I could, sort of like you were saying earlier, you know, win at? And I think it's really funny, because the part that the part that I'm in my head about really has to do with, like, winning and losing, right? Like, what is success? You know, what is that finish line, or what is that start line? Or, you know, when do I push? When do I quit? You know what I mean? As regards to relationships.
Yeah, we were talking a couple of mornings ago about the concept of, is quitting the same thing as failing to start?
Right.
Are they one and the same?
Yeah.
And I made the argument that they are.
Is failure just not starting? Is that the same as failure? Like, you're a failure because you haven't started anything. I think that's a really interesting question. And you're saying that failure is not starting?
I'm saying it's the same thing. Like it's both, you know, success, if you're looking at the dichotomy, success versus failure. I mean, failure is not meeting an end goal. So if you never start, that's the safest way to, one, make yourself feel better, because you can justify the excuse of, well, I never started, therefore I didn't fail. But let's just strip that back to what that is. It's just saying, I didn't have the balls to even start.
Right. I mean, they call that apathy. You become apathetic, right? You sort of blow everything off. And really what it is that there's a fear there.
There's fear.
Right.
Yes. And what you're saying, and I love his term of the all-powerful infant. And I remember that when I was kind of in the middle of deconstructing my own faith and religion, I remember having that epiphany that, like, we were involved in a construct that I believed, and I used to use this term, created perpetual toddlers.
Wow.
It was constantly creating perpetual toddlers. And as pastors and as leaders, we were actually rewarded intrinsically and extrinsically for creating perpetual toddlers. And by that, I meant people who needed to depend on us, people who needed our counsel, people who needed our advice, people that were going to listen to us, people that were going to hear from God by hearing from us what we heard from God.
Wow.
These concepts, and how that's, like, essentially what you're doing. It's that failure to launch that culture perpetuates. And I think it's a similar thing that we're seeing right now in family dynamics, is that the world is scary, and therefore we have parents that are coddling. It's hard. It's very hard for people to find, rent's expensive. All those kind of hurdles are expensive, and making it so that it's harder and harder for young people to launch, or to even try to launch.
Well, here's the thing that this is the binary that I think is just now sort of coming online in my brain. Is it comes down to winning and losing. And Sato's whole thing, his whole cure for Hikikomori, this hyper depression where you're stuck in your house for months at a time and you have social anxiety, his whole cure is loss. He's like, you have to go experience these losses, or you're going to be dealing with the all-powerful infant in your mind. And I think what you're saying when it comes to like sort of oftentimes faith or religion is you have this, man, if you're not winning all the time, then you're not sort of glorifying God, or you're not really crossing the finish line, or you're not really mature. And, whatever that might be. Like, look, if your kids are not perfect, right, you're not winning, right? If you have, if you're divorced, right, you're not winning, right? And all of these essential losses that you're supposed to actually experience are the things that make you mature. Yet you have these social or these socio-religical constructs that keep you in sort of a toddler state, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm a huge advocate for losing. Like, I think losing teaches you so much more than winning does, about yourself, about the world. But you have to view even what?
Well, I was just going to say, and what's happening in the mind of the Hikikomori person, and I think even in general today, is there's so much social pressure. Everyone's putting their best self out there on Facebook and acting like they're all successful. So it's harder to win, right? It's so much harder to get those wins that are presented to you, right? Those essential wins that are going to castrate you and going to get you to not live in the all-powerful infant stage.
Yes, I think so. I just finished reading a book that was fantastic called Wanting.
Yeah.
And one of the things he talks about is that we have these models, these mimetic models, and mimetic is like who you want to imitate. Basically, it's imitation. It's the definition of imitation. That's where meme comes from, right?
Yeah.
You're mimicking something. And so the thing about models and what we are holding the standard of success or failure to is that we used to only hold success or failure according to who we knew. Like, we wanted to be like our parents, or we wanted to be like the guy down the street that we knew was good at something, or our friend. But what the world of social media has done, and the world of media in general, is it has brought all of a sudden all of our social models that we're basing our mimetic desire on right into our sphere. Now, all of a sudden, we're comparing ourselves to a supermodel because they're on our feed. We're comparing ourselves to a really successful, 10x entrepreneur because they're in our feed, and we're reading what they're doing, and we're seeing their day-to-day life. And all of a sudden, these models are now brought into our world. And so I do think that is creating more of an anxiety in young people, because it's like, okay, what does success look like? All of a sudden, success is not, can I, maybe the baby boomer generation, where it's like, hey, success is if you land a really great job that has a pension that could provide for your family, you find somebody that you're going to be with the rest of your life, and you purchase a little tiny home and maybe own a car. Like, that was success. And now success is all of a sudden, like I said, is your net worth $1 million? Is your, and did you get an Ivy League education? And like, were you able to have all of these other things? Now the model of success that we're looking at has now, crowded our own personal sphere, and it's getting much, much closer, and the standard is much, much higher.
Right. And here's the thing that I think what you're saying is, we were talking about starting lines and finishing lines, and the race in between or whatever. And it's like, what's happening is you have, in your human experience, especially in the Western world, you have all of these finish lines that, like you're saying, success is this. Well, the finish line is this, and I just need to get to there. Like in Christianity, if my kids are perfect, that's a finish line that I can like, if I never get divorced, that's a finish line that's like, if I'm never in debt, that's a finish line that's like, or, society is telling you, like, if you weigh 160 pounds and you're 5'9" as a male, like, you are like, and you have all of these finish lines that you and I, after, 20 7 years of marriage and 50 years of life start to realize, oh shit, I'm crossing finish lines that don't really matter. Like I'm crossing these finish lines that Sato's telling me they don't really matter. I mean, they're not going to really make you either happier or more mature, right? And I love what you were saying. Tell me, do that thing with finish lines and start lines again. And like, what do you consider win and loss?
Yeah, and in fact, those finish lines, those hard and fast, like this is failure, this is success,
Yes.
will actually cause you to be operating at a state of what we would call in the losses all the time. Like you're in the losses all the time because, and this comes from a book called Quit, which is fantastic. I would
Poker
definitely
player lady.
Yeah, she's the poker player lady, and she wrote one of my favorite books of all time called Thinking in Bets. But this book was just released, fantastic, can't say enough about it. But she talks about this notion of that we're always operating in the losses, because when we start on the finish line or start on the starting line and we have a finish line in front of us, whether any sort of goal or whatever it is, if that's the only goal we have, if that's the like altruistic thing that we're looking for, even if you have multiple of those, like you often won't even evaluate if that's still a good goal, because what ends up happening is when you start on the finish line, you stop looking at yourself and any progress that you're making towards the finish line.
Wait, when you start on the starting line, you're saying?
Sorry, yeah. On the starting line, let's say you start at the starting line.
Yeah.
You're not going to be looking at yourself as being in the games, as gaining, as progressing, as growing, because you stop looking at the start line. You're now only looking at the finish line, which means you're only looking at the deficit between where you are right now
and the finish line
and where you need to go. But you're not looking at how far you've come already.
Wow.
And so when you have this dichotomy and you have these really harsh all or nothing goals, you basically are operating kind of always in the losses, and you forget to celebrate what's going on, what's happening. And it also makes you not sit back and actually go, I need to reevaluate this goal. Was this goal an actual thing I really, really cared about? You know that I'm a goal-oriented person.
Right.
I write lists. I have constant lists in multiple locations. I am a capture of knowledge and lists. And if I think something, I'm writing it down somewhere in one of my capturing devices. So the funny thing is because I'm a goal-oriented person and a list person, I will write shit down that I know I'm going to do in 2 seconds, like pick up the laundry, because I'll do it while I'm sitting there in the parking lot of the dry cleaner, just so I can have the accomplishment of checking it off my list like I did something.
That's awesome.
Right. And so
your little win, right? Your little finish
it's a
line.
Little win, which that has a lot of like good psychology to it, like, hey, reward momentum. But that's what it's doing. It's rewarding momentum, right? I know that like the end goal is I'm going to try to get everything accomplished today that I wanted to. But the thing that when we were discussing it really struck me is when you started talking about the goals that we used to set within Christianity, that you don't ever look at and go, why is that a goal? Or it becomes something that you're like, wait, did I just rename it so that I could meet it?
Yeah.
Which, I think you're like, I was saying to you, like, what would you consider this type of thing? And you said, well, the goal of staying married forever, even if you're freaking miserable, you don't really reevaluate and go like, is that a goal I should be trying to keep?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
And the thing about that is what happens in that, and the Sato's whole thing is he's saying oftentimes, like, even that loss of divorce, right, is so essential. It's so essential to your maturity. It's so essential to your ability to participate in a better and different relationship. And what happens is when you are stuck in that sort of world, right, like with that finish line ahead of you, you miss out on what is really, really essential. And you really are, stuck as a toddler. If that makes sense. Like,
Yeah,
and
totally.
that's what,
It's these
and that's the whole point of what you were saying is like when you get into any sort of like religious system, you do have to watch out for those things that are going to really stunt your growth, right?
yeah, there's sunk cost to them. You're continuing by every time you don't quit something or don't really reevaluate if that's still a good goal, you're still sinking tons of energy and resources and
right,
love and everything into that. And you might have sunk costs at the end and realize like I did that all for nothing.
right.
Like, or what feels like nothing. But what I
But
love
that's
what you're saying is like it's so critical that we experience losses along the way
right.
so
But
that we actually can reinvest and take those resources, that energy, and put it towards something more worthwhile.
well, here's the thing is what you're saying is you really can't walk away from something, a relationship like that, and say, I did it all for nothing. Because what you're saying is, yeah, you're going to have that in your brain. I did it all for nothing. If all you look at is the finish line. But if you look back and go, man, I am so much further from where I started. Like that is the key, right?
I
That's
love that.
that's the place. Like, let's look back at the start line and say, okay, wait, I think I'm a better person. I think what is happening to me in my life, what is happening in my psyche, what is happening in my world, my inner and outer world is better than where I started, right? I'm more mature. I'm more wise. And I may be more sad right now, but that's not going to last forever either. And again, going back to Sado and Hikikomori is this is just such an essential part of life that I'm noticing many people are literally terrified of. They're terrified of not, you know, not having something to say on social media that looks like they're winning or whatever, you know, they're just terrified of really life. And it is scary. And that's essential. Like, I don't know. I'm just so in my head about this. I love the idea because what it's doing to me right now is it's making me go, okay, wait, Sado, wait, white American male. Like, let's just say everyone is healed of Hikikomori and like we're all like, you know, functioning in society. Well, now what? Like, wait, what is success, right? Like, is this the thing that's going to cause me to have the CEO job and the, you know, the pension or whatever it is? And I look at it and I think to myself, like, no, I don't, to me, that's not my end game right now at 50 years old. I'm looking at things like, what does success really mean to me? What really does matter? I want to double down on those things. I want to have the ability to make those things last, right? I want to have hurt enough. I want to have enough wisdom to be successful at the things that I am finding are most meaningful and satisfying in my life.
I love that. But what that requires, right, is what we were talking about is like what that requires is that true assessment of what is meaningful, not just so that you have this goal of success and then you go, yeah, but this is actually creating bad fruit. Like this is like, I keep putting that out there as this thing that I need to do, but it's actually creating all of this chaos in my life to get there. Or we talked about the fact that like, and you know, I always go back to Nietzsche's thing of like, you know, quit calling it something that it's not.
Right.
Like quit, you know, I'll give an example.
Yeah.
In the Christian world, you are righteous, which is right standing before God, which you could say is an absolute standard. That's a finish line. Right standing before God. I mean, hell yeah, give it to me. Yeah. Right. Well, in order to be right standing before God, you have to have this certain attribute, right? So it's like, okay, well, the attribute, you could be like, I want to be a successful person. I want to have wealth. I want to leave a legacy. For me, this was always a really big rub because I'm a finance person. I like investing. I like collecting art. I like things that are going to appreciate we have multiple homes. It's like, I want things that are going to appreciate. I want to view success. One of the criteria of success in my own life is certain amounts of money to be able to leave a legacy. I want to build us a family foundation. All of
That's
that, you
beautiful.
know this about.
Yes.
Well, as a pastor, that was a hard goal. You know
Mhm.
why? Because that's not a righteous goal. That goal doesn't get you to right standing before God,
Wow.
because someone deemed it not a good goal.
Like it's greed or something.
Well, that's what I'm saying. And that's what Nietzsche would say. Okay, so what you do, his whole thing is, what Christians have done is, because they aren't successful at doing that, they just lower the bar, or say, I'm just going to say that that's a sin. I'm just going to say it's a sin because I don't have what it takes to acquire wealth. And so instead of me saying, I just don't have what it takes, I'm going to change the goal, and I'm going to make it say, the goal is to not be greedy. The goal is to not want money. The goal is to not acquire wealth. In fact, I'm going to go further than that, and I'm going to say it's an anti-goal. It's a sin. And so therefore, I can meet that goal. Give me
And
that
so
one. Hell yeah. I can
so here,
easily meet that one. There's a finish line there. So
wow.
instead of like me having this finish line that's really hard to meet, I just dumb down the finish line and actually make it to where the thing that I wanted was so evil. So I justify the fact that I just didn't have what it takes.
Wow. So it's
I
this
mean,
whole thing of like, you start out in your mind and you're like, I'm going to win. Right. And you go and you try to do the thing you're saying, and you realize, I can't win at this. And then you go back and you go, well, I'm going to win. And so I guess the winning for me here would be, I'm going to win it, not being greedy. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's that whole thing of like, no, I have to win.
no, totally. We will do. I mean, that is the nature of things, right? That's like,
Yeah.
if we can't meet the goal, we will find a way to shift it so that we don't have
We're not
those
losers.
we don't have those competing interests anymore, because we just shifted the standard. Now, what you're saying is like, you really are evaluating the standard and saying, did I shift the standard, or is the goal like, is that actually something of value to me? And we've seen this multiple times, right? Let's take the money one away, and let's say like, okay, I really don't have a say in my relationship. I'm just speaking like from a woman's perspective. I don't have a say in my relationship. I feel like my husband isn't listening to me. So instead of me feeling like he doesn't listen to me and I'm not having a say, and like, my voice doesn't count, I'm going to say, hey, submission is the goal.
Right. So I can win.
That's my win. So I'm not failing anymore.
I'm
The
not a
goal is
loser.
just changed. I'm
Yeah.
not a loser. And what I think, there could be genuine desire. You could just desire to be a more submissive person or a more meek person. That could be a wonderful desire. And I think what you're saying is like, you could really be evaluating and saying, this isn't an external thing that's happening to me. I really want to be a more meek person. I want to be that power under submission. But my point is that people aren't always honest about why they have changed the goal.
Right. And that is the perpetual Hikikomori state. Like, that is the perpetual, that's an infantile, it really is an infantile sort of mindset, which I think that is just absolutely fascinating to me. It's
Yeah,
like Beck, why don't we celebrate? I'm a loser, baby. Why don't you? You know what I mean? What's wrong with being a loser sometimes? Like, what's wrong with it? Like, this whole thing of, and that's what I love, that I think is what Sato is painting that picture of. It's like, man, loss is so essential. Being a loser, it's okay to stop and go, I just suck at this, or I'm losing at this. That's essential for you to participate and be able to participate in relationships and society, and really meet those things that or get those goals, meet those finish lines that you really do want. To be
Yeah,
able
and
to
I
say,
don't,
like, I'm not meeting my goal is a big deal.
yes, and I don't think you're saying like it's okay to be a loser, like just give up. It's,
No.
I think what you're saying is like it's okay and it's actually beneficial for you to fail forward,
Yeah.
fail fast, pick it back up, try something
Yes.
else. I mean, no one, you never get anywhere if you're not constantly trying, and no one has immediate success on every single step forward. And so if you're not a person who's out there failing, you're not a person who's growing in any sense.
Exactly. And the admission of that, I think, is essential to the actual win. Example, I remember I would, this is very rare, but I would preach a bad sermon from time to time. When I was
You're right,
preaching,
that was rare.
I know, I'm just kidding. But, and I knew it. And I would say, man, I don't know, I was really fighting against myself up there or whatever. It's just, and most of the time, and this is, I think, coming from, just sort of a good heart, but most people would be like, yeah, but there was that one person in the audience who really needed to hear like that super confusing no point message that was so boring that no one could actually understand it all because you were so in your head about it. And I'm like, no, I need to actually admit that it sucked so that I can grow. And I remember thinking about, people who would preach or even public speak, and they would often either not know or they would lie to themselves about the quality of their sermon, right? Or the quality of their message. And I'm like, man, 90% of the battle is knowing when you suck. Because when you know you suck, you at least have something you can start with.
Oh, I
And I think
completely agree.
that's such a big deal. And I would like to I really do want to apply that to relationships too. Because there's times when you have to admit, man, I am really not communicating like I should. Like, it's not a thing of like, you're misunderstanding me. It's like, I need to up my game in this. Or, man, I'm not being romantic at all. Or, you know what, when it really comes down to it, I'm not trying right now. I'm, like stuff like that. When you're able to admit that kind of stuff, right? And you don't keep this false, like winning bullshit. It's that's an essential move to create the ability to participate in society and relationships. Really, it's an essential move.
Yes. And just like, I love this. It's in relationships. It's like oftentimes we'll be like, well, for me, I could be like, well, he loves me anyway. I don't really need to try to make my body still look good for him. Well,
Right.
I call bullshit. No, actually, I still do need to keep trying that. And instead of just lowering the bar or changing the finish line, I need to just keep moving forward and failing fast and then picking myself back up and like keep, we all need to be doing that. And it does everyone a disservice when we call it something else. We're like, well, true love is just that he would love me even if I'm a fat, person that he doesn't find attractive anymore. And I'm not saying that people don't find that attractive, but I'm saying I know you and I know what I would feel sexy as. And I'm like, okay, so if I know that already about the situation, I need to just quit changing the finish line.
Right. I love
Or
it.
calling it something different and having really honest conversations, or like you're saying, like communication about like, well, if I know I'm really not doing great in that area, instead of just saying it's okay, they'll understand, I need to be like, yeah, I need to get better at that. And we know we're in a dangerous spot when we're in a position where we do not have people around us that are going to be honest about that.
Yeah.
When we're in a state where, which I think is what happens when you're describing about like you had a terrible sermon in a church setting, no one's going to tell you that your sermon sucked. Why? Because you're God's man speaking the word. Like, surely somebody would have gotten it because it was ordained by God. Well, it doesn't matter. It could have sucked. So why don't we just have cultures that say, hey, pastor, I noticed you didn't do any prep. You totally phoned that in. That sermon sucked. That would probably really help the pastor to understand, I actually do need to put my best foot forward and try to prep and try to learn and try to advance. We would all do better when we're in those kind of environments, and we know we're in danger when we're removing ourselves from environments that actually challenge us.
Right.
In relationships or professions or extracurricular activities. That's when you get to that like cozy, irrelevant phase.
Yeah, yeah. You become cozy, but you become irrelevant. I love it. But I would say, you know, I the point made that I would love to be in a culture that has that sort of vulnerability and has that, but you do have to have a lot of love behind a comment like that. Like if you're just
Oh,
tearing, I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying
totally.
for sure.
Totally. And,
But
and
there's just so much. I think that there is a lot here, that we're talking about. And I just absolutely love the idea of what do you do to dismantle the all-powerful infant? What do you
yes.
do? What are the moves that you need to make where you're going like, man, this is really keeping me a toddler in this area? And it's probably has a lot to do with some losses that you need to experience or admit.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying is so important, because it's hard to find environments that are both challenging and loving.
Yeah.
It's very difficult.
Yeah.
But we can mitigate some of our own like stagnancy or infancy or perpetual toddlerism by having those honest conversations with ourselves. Like what you were saying about, like, I needed to tell myself that the sermon sucked. I actually needed to own that. I didn't need anyone, like, people could tell me that, that's fine. But honestly, if I just am a really critical, like in a really good way, if I'm a person that actually believes I can do better, if I look at it from that vantage point, then I'm going to be looking at everything as like, okay, Charity, have an honest conversation with yourself. Was that the best you could give? Was it the best you could bring to the table? And then I can answer the question and decide, okay, I can be honest about that and move forward. I don't need a bunch of people to tell me about it as much as I need myself to be honest with myself and stop calling it something else to make myself feel better about it.
Right.
And I just be honest about what it is, but not let that get me into like in the losses so much that I can't see I've made progress.
Right.
But just to the point where I see that I'm just on a journey and it's just progress. And I'm seeing the gains as much as I'm seeing the losses.
Yeah, I love that. And the big idea, I think one of the big ideas that's hitting home right now too is just watching out for those false finishes, those false finish lines, those things that really, when you cross that finish line, you go, oh my God, this didn't make me any more mature. This didn't make me any deeper. This didn't make me any happier. And in fact, it's just starting another race. Like, God, like, what I mean? I think that those are, and that's what's happening in my 50-year-old mind, is that I'm going to be aware of those things. And I'm going to look at, running races that matter.
Yes, I love that, man. Coining that term, false finishes.
False finishes.
Whether you call them something they're not to make yourself feel better, or you put it on the list when you're already in the matter of doing it so you can check it off, or you just realize that the endeavor was not going to get you to where you actually wanted to go in a meaningful life. All of those things are false finishes.
And it's not, I don't think that what we're doing is a more sophisticated way of basically, I guess you would call it moving the goalpost or, calling losses wins. But I would say that a person really does have to practice some self-kindness and say to themselves, like, man, this loss is essential. Me getting out there and trying and failing, me getting out there and realizing I have to quit this, you're so much further than when you started. And that's a win, man. That's actually a win, and that's going to help you determine those finishes that matter. And you're going to do less of the false finishing,
Yes, I love that.
Yeah.
That's really good. All right. I know you got to get to finish house building and I get to see you in a couple of days.
I love you, baby.
Love you. Have a good day.
Okay, you too.
Bye.
Wait, babe, wait. How do we end this?
By saying thank you.
Okay, you guys are awesome. Thank you. There's nothing more encouraging than you hitting that like button and commenting.
And don't forget to subscribe.
And I know there's more. You have a list. Might as well go down the list.
Right. Okay. Watch the video of this podcast on our Beautiful Steph YouTube channel or on our website where you can actually download transcripts and show notes of the episode. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram.
If today's episode made your together even better, tell someone.
Okay, now.
Right now.
Today.
Okay.
You can take one step.
It's just one step.
Toward the beautiful relationship you want in your life.
You got this.